Hi, this is Pilleater. I would like to discuss games without a rulebook or rules. So, I noticed something about the game Keyforge, which came out today, and I got my core set 2 days ago. So, Keyforge's rules were published online in a PDF, and I thought the same PDF would be in the box set. But in the box, the intro box, the rules are skimmed to only 4 pages, unlike the PDF, which is complete with about 40 to 50 something pages. The sheet tells you to look online for the rest of the rules, that is, the PDF rules, as the sheet should be enough to understand what you are doing. Now, Keyforge itself is a game with minimal components, as I said previously in the GM-less screencast, and the rules are much more free. So a game that has nothing or less components has more freedom, and Keyforge only has a few tokens in the dex itself. Now this is interesting because the designer, Richard Garfield, he wrote a textbook titled The Characteristics of Games, and he mentions on the rules chapter, I believe it's chapter 3, that the rules are only guidelines. They are not ultimate laws, they're just the expression of the game, and the rulebook itself is not the game. This is very similar to what Gary Gygax wrote in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons in '78, and Garfield pretty much now retook this and put this in an academic tone. It became a tradition in itself. But in a super fast technological age, less rules is better. No one wants too much rules, just enough play. And if Garfield had the power, he would eliminate all rulebooks or understanding of the game from all games, and then we could just jump into the game without learning. I think this is a nod to the language game of Ludwig Wittgenstein, written in Philosophical Investigations, where Wittgenstein argues that there's a game in our language, and that applying ourselves to the text of that language, we have to understand where all these words are coming from. And this is said also by Raphael Koster in his book Theory of Fun, where playing a game is learning a game, and you're learning something new constantly over and over again and applying it to what you learn, only then to delete yourself and relearn the next game. How come we can't just play games naturally and know what we're doing? Maybe there is some innateness to playing a game. So I'd like to take a quote from science fiction writer Gene Wolfe in his book, or he wrote the introduction in Lexicon Earthus. That's the dictionary for the Earth cycle. And Wolfe did the foreword, and in it he's praising, or he's at least talking about language and how one would go about understanding his own work, Book of the New Sun. And on page, I believe it is XV, one of the Roman numerals, he writes, I'll say this quote, sorry. He writes, quote, "There is an enormous difference between meeting an unusual word that has been trotted out to show off and meeting it in a meaningful context. Some years ago, I read an account of an American who knew no German and a German who knew no English building a boat together. The American would say, 'Bring me a flat board,' and the German would bring him a board of the proper size. They were actually doing something, you see, and the German understood what it was they were doing, because they were working together, exactly as a writer and a reader must. The unintelligible request was heard as, 'I need something,' and the German had little difficulty guessing what was needed. Why bother, in that case, to learn English or German? Why would you need a book like this one? In the narrowest sense, you don't. You can get through the whole Book of the New Sun without it, and it's more than likely you already have. But knowing is better and broader and deeper than ever, even the best guessing, and knowing is more fun. Think how much the American would have liked to know German, and how much the German would like to know English." So, again, to really understand Gene Wolfe's work, you have to understand the Latin words that he uses. And it is more fun to know, but language comes natural. And this is kind of the state of, again, Wittgenstein's language game, and Wolf borrows this. So further investigating on Wikipedia, games without rules on Wikipedia are classified as list of games with concealed rules. That is, games with concealed rules are games where the rules are intentionally concealed from new players, either because their discovery is part of the game itself, or because the game is a hoax and the rules do not exist. In fiction, the counterpart of the first category are games that supposedly do have a rule set, but that rule set is not disclosed. So here's a list of these games that Wikipedia jots down. There is Eleusis, Haggle, Mal, Paranoia, which is a role-playing game, Zendo, which is by Andy Looney, 52 Pickup, which you've probably heard many times before. But for example, like a game like Eleusis, first published by Martin Gardner, who Richard Garfield dedicates characteristics of games to, it's a multi-genre card game where one player chooses a secret rule to determine which cards can be played on top of others, and the other players attempt to determine the rule using inductive logic. It was published by Martin Gardner, actually. Eleusis is sometimes considered an analogy to problems of scientific method. It can be compared with card game Mal, which also has a secret rules that can be learned inductively. The games of Zendo, again by Andy Looney, also feature players attempting to discover inductively a secret rule or rules of the master or spectators who declare play legal or illegal on the basis of the rules. So there becomes more of scientific method. Now, here's some more list of games, especially in fiction. In particular, Calvin Ball in the comic series Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin Ball is a game regularly played by the main characters. The only consistent rule of Calvin Ball is that Calvin Ball may never be played with the same rules twice. Interesting. And so you understand that these games, if everything was like Calvin Ball, just like the German and the Englishman building a boat, we kind of play this game that's almost innate with ourselves, and everything becomes inductive logic of understanding what's happening. And so going back to Keyforge, Fantasy Flight, or the publisher Richard Garfield, wants me to play Keyforge with the rules already knowing what I have to do. And so this reminds me of a product of the White Box. And the White Box is a product that's basically a game design workshop in a box. And the tagline says, "Get the game in your head on the table." And that's that. It's just a box with little green, black, white pieces and some bricks. There's a textbook in there that tells you about game design, but everything's in your head. As a social experiment, think about the board games that you see at a toy store or just a board game store. And instead of basically looking at these games or reading the rule books, maybe you should just throw the rule book out and look at it as like the White Box, where it's just things. And through inductive logic, you could make up the rules and know what each piece does. And that gives a big open space about how we should think about games and game designs, and itself the YouTube sphere, even if that becomes a game when you're searching for YouTube videos. And I also want to put out these books as well, as a little digression here. There's also Improv for Gamers by Karen 12, which recently came out this month, and Never Unprepared, the Complete Game Master's Guide to Session Prep. I want to take note that these are two different bourgeois individuals and their theory about game design. Karen 12's wrote Improv for Gamers for a social justice audience. There's just cartoon drawings of Muslims and black chicks throughout it, and that we don't really need dice like it shows on the front cover, and we're just acting and improving. You know, it's all mental, as I said before in the GM-less screencast. And in the book Never Unprepared, he talks about make the game mastering as a session prep. So before you even execute a game, he wants you to know that you should prep and understand the rules itself. That's preparation, right? Well, again, do you really need preparation to play Keyforge? Do you really need to read the rules? You have to read the rules to understand what's going on, because as Gene Wolfe says, knowing is better. But again, prepping is just a way of doubting yourself. If Garfield or Wittgenstein's language game says that it's innate or it's best played without it, why do you need prep? And this goes along with improv for gamers. Why do you need to improv for roleplay, or why do you even need prep? When all of it is relative. So I'd like to end it with one quote about improv from Christian Lander's second volume of Stuff White People Like, Whiter Shades of Pale. And it is entry 33 in the book. That is page 81. I'll read about why white people like improv, and not relative to game design. In most normal situations, if you were going to give up your time and money to see someone put on a show, you would hope that the performers would practice, or at very least prepare something in advance to entertain you. Not white people. For years they have been enamored with a style of humor called improv. At its core, improv is where a bunch of white people on stage take suggestions from the audience and then make something up. It's a bit like charades, but with a cover charge. The white person's passion for improv begins in high school, where they will join a club of like-minded individuals. If you ever looked through someone's yearbook and thought, what's the easiest way to find all the nerds who are bad at math? Simply flip to the Improv's club page and you will have your answer. As these budding improv players reach college, the passion intensifies as they break off into smaller tropes with wacky names. As a rule of thumb, the best improv names are generally wordplays on historical figures, popular films, peoples, or television shows. For example, the Betty White Stripes, Kirk Cameron, or the Andrew Jackson Five. It is unknown why white people find this wordplay to be so funny, but if you follow white people on Twitter, you probably already figured this out after a barrage of tweets following someone who wrote #IfBandsWereFood. After college, white people can find improv in literally every city in America, with the main hubs being Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. White people simply cannot get enough of it, and white improv performers are willing to give up their time, money, and, for the performers, potentially lucrative careers. When you arrive at an improv event, you will notice that the crowd is made almost entirely of only the friends and families of the performers. As you have probably already noticed, guilt is a powerful motivator for white people, and an improv show is proof positive that even white people have figured out how to use white guilt to their advantage. There are rumors that there are non-white people participating in this activity, but judging by the cast of Saturday Night Live and every sketch comedy show on television, this would appear to be false. Now take note of the Improv for Gamers book that there are sketches of black women and Muslim in it. And Lander swiftly debunks this as improv is just something white people like. And so, by understanding this, it becomes almost natural, and this digression proves that games itself become innate within our nature. And so we must ask the big question, why do we even need rulebooks or rules within games? The rules are in our head all along. We just don't understand the bigger truth. Thanks for listening. www.pilleater.com